Story 1. As a taproom owner, I am sad to see the social aspect of meeting over a couple of beers fade away. As a rational person, I completely understand why people choose cannabis instead. Story 2. On one hand, I wish kids wouldn't think of cannabis as harmless. On the other hand, it's much better than alcohol in many respects. Story 3. I am a 75-year-old man. My opinion is that too much of anything is a bad thing. Story 4. I am 40 years old. I prefer marijuana, but it is definitely less social. It is interesting that, with marijuana legal in some states, there are no marijuana cafes or equivalents of bars. Story 5. As an alcoholic who is 51 days California sober, I think it is pretty dope. Story 6. I just wish they did not also think that driving while high is acceptable. Note: please stop inferring from this comment that I believe drinking and driving is acceptable. If you have been using any intoxicating substance, you should not operate a vehicle. I do not care if you think you are a better driver while high because you are more careful, you are still impaired. Story 7. No one ever picked a fight with me because they were stoned. Story 8. In my experience as an educator, young people are using both substances less. They are not replacing cannabis with alcohol. Instead, they are drinking far less and smoking somewhat less. Alcohol has many harms, but cannabis at that age is not only about physical risk. It can reduce motivation and make young people more tolerant of boredom and less likely to rise to expectations. Another trend is that drugs and alcohol are being replaced by social media. Young people are getting frequent dopamine hits from the internet, another illusory source of short-term pleasure with long-term consequences. I am not judging which is worse. We should promote the idea of moderation and help young people understand the benefits and risks of different forms of escapism. It is not about controlling access. It is about giving them information, self-awareness, and critical thinking skills so they can make informed, autonomous choices. Story 9. It's their business, but I do not like that being regularly stoned is accepted in a way that being regularly drunk is not. Young people are essentially making themselves unable to function cognitively. They are often too high to think clearly and do not see it as a problem because it is just weed. It does have an effect on memory and cognitive function even between sessions, and it is noticeable in some people after a day or more without use. Given the state of the world, who can blame someone for wanting to put a haze over it? I wish it were not used as a substitute for dealing with personal issues and for doing the work of self-improvement. But so much of the state of the world is a mess beyond most people's control. Source: previous user, observations and anecdotal evidence from others. Story 10. I am an older person who has largely replaced moderate alcohol use with moderate cannabis use. Good call, kids. Story 11. Good for them? I do not care. Between the two, cannabis is clearly less harmful than alcohol. That is not to say it does not have harms. Any drug does. With cannabis, one cannot practically overdose in a medical sense. With alcohol, one can die from an overdose known as alcohol poisoning. Alcohol is also far more destructive to the human body and brain. I really do not care. A future generation may reject cannabis and return to alcohol, or some new drug may become popular. Sobriety is generally better for individuals and for society, but humans do sometimes choose to get intoxicated. Story 12. I wish they would not smoke while driving. It is sometimes seen as acceptable, but driving under the influence of either is not safe. Story 13. As a young person who uses cannabis daily and has barely ever touched alcohol, I believe cannabis is better for you than alcohol. There are no calories and no hangover. The problem is the cannabis culture. It glorifies smoking all day, normalizes driving under the influence, and acts as if these behaviors are harmless. Story 14. I do not care if you smoke marijuana. Just do not make it your whole personality. Story 15. I hate the propaganda that is pushed around the clock claiming marijuana is harmless. It is not. It is a vice like any other, and humans have always used vices to cope with life. Marijuana is just the latest vehicle. Story 16. I am not sure they are replacing it with cannabis. I think they are simply not drinking. Cannabis numbers are skewed because it is becoming legal and surveys are becoming more accurate after historical and intentional underreporting. Story 17. I am a 36-year-old man. I smoked occasionally growing up. I got in trouble in college and that changed smoking for me. It just made me paranoid. A few years ago, I started smoking again. It opens me up conversationally and emotionally, and in general, it seems to make my interactions with friends and family both more silly and more meaningful. I also make music for a living. It is literally a cheat code for creativity. Story 18. When I drink, I am fun and enjoying myself. When I smoke, I am boring and, unfortunately, fine with being bored. Story 19. I am conflicted. I had a drinking problem. I quit drinking for 4 years but started using marijuana. During that time, I got high often and stopped going out, stopped making friends, and did not want to travel or go on adventures. I did not really want to do anything. I just wanted to lie on the couch, be alone, smoke, zone out, and watch movies. I thought it was self-care for a long time. Eventually, I realized that despite my liver being healthier and no longer having debilitating hangovers, my life was worse in many ways from being high all the time. Ultimately, I am the problem, and there is no magic substance that can cure my issues or soothe my negative feelings. If you are mentally and physically healthy and have a good social network, do what you want in moderation but avoid hard drugs. If you are not, work on yourself because the answer is not in the bottle or the leaf. Story 20. Neither is great for their development, but I would be much more relaxed if my son came home stoned rather than drunk. I made the switch myself about 10 years ago. Both my physical and mental health have improved greatly. Story 21. No bueno. I'll tell you why. Cannabis use often starts as a social activity, but for many it does not stay that way. It can gradually become a solitary habit. I have seen it firsthand with my own child. What began as casual use eventually led to cannabinoid hyperemesis syndrome, a very real and painful condition that many chronic users either do not know about or outright deny. I am aware this might trigger defensive reactions, but I am not sharing this for approval. I am sharing what actually happened. My child became addicted. She spent nearly 4 years spiraling, using cannabis daily, often alone, believing it was helping her. It was not. She lost over 30 pounds from constant nausea and vomiting. The only relief came from taking repeated hot showers or baths. A known symptom of cannabinoid hyperemesis syndrome, she became aggressive when anyone suggested she cut back. On a short family trip, when she could not smoke, she had a full breakdown, completely unlike her usual self. And yet she insisted there was no problem. The comparison to alcohol came up a lot. You drink, so why can I smoke? But it is not the same. Yes, alcohol abuse is serious too, but this was different in intensity, in secrecy, and in denial. Honestly, it was more like watching someone hooked on opioids. I am not saying everyone who uses cannabis will go down this path, but for some, especially heavy long-term users, cannabis is certainly not harmless. It is not natural, and it is not better than alcohol. We should be honest about that. Story 22. More instances of psychosis and random attacks by users with ongoing mental health issues. Story 23. Different mechanisms for the same problem. Some will argue, but it is scientifically true that smoking cannabis is harmful. It is habit-forming and can cause long-term brain damage. It can cause lung cancer, throat cancer, and gum cancer. No person under 25 should be legally allowed to smoke anything or drink any alcohol. It has a fundamentally harmful effect on brain development. I do not know why the United States is so morally bankrupt that we allow people whose brains have not yet fully formed to consume products that harm that development. We have made it illegal for pregnant women to smoke, but young people can consume tetrahydrocannabinol. It is disgusting. If you are 40 and smoke, it is harmful, but so is sitting in front of a computer for more than 8 hours a day. Story 24. I've never met an angry stoner. I've been battered, assaulted, spat at, and harassed by drunken people. More power to them. They have never deserved the repression inflicted on them. Story 25. When people start using cannabis too early, it can slow them down. Alcohol is definitely more dangerous overall, but cannabis culture is troubling. Too many people think it is cool to smoke every day and deny they have a problem. I think cannabis use will eventually normalize. Story 26. It's not just younger people. I'm almost 40. If I get drunk, I'm gonna feel absolutely terrible for at least the next day. If I get very stoned, to the point where I can barely lift myself off the couch or form a coherent sentence, I'll wake up the next day feeling completely fine. Story 27. I would prefer it to be neither, but being realistic, the use of tetrahydrocannabinol and tetrahydrocannabinolic acid is nowhere near as damaging as excessive alcohol consumption. Story 28. If there's one thing I've learned about humans over my lifetime, it's that they enjoy sex and getting intoxicated. It is much better to become intoxicated on something that has minimal physical effects than on something that has disastrous physical effects. People are going to use drugs. Point them toward options that are less harmful. Cannabis is among the least harmful. Story 29. Alcohol is, without a doubt, worse for the individual and society. Story 30. There is no data showing that they have been replacing alcohol with marijuana. Rather, younger generations are choosing not to drink. That is good for them. Story 31. I did this and replaced the weed with alcohol and did not cut it. I am so happy. Story 32. There are distinct opiates of the masses: religion, political ideology, alcohol, drugs, social media, the internet, and phones. Replacing one with another based on popularity is inevitable. Nevertheless, they are regarded as necessary for the proper functioning of society by those who control it. If people were more engaged in government, we would not have as much dysfunction. These opiates distract citizens and allow the owners of society to continue making money and subjugating people. Story 33. I wish they understood the potential harm. Marijuana-induced psychosis is real and has lifelong effects. If you are a person who has risk factors for developing schizophrenia, it is even more dangerous. Story 34. My wife is a psychiatric nurse practitioner. She strongly discourages marijuana use. She warns that marijuana can push young people with mild psychiatric issues over the edge. It does not help anxiety and may delay appropriate care. She has seen young people who use large amounts of marijuana develop full psychosis or schizophrenia. She has also observed cannabinoid hyperemesis syndrome. Story 35. They are not going to drive drunk. They may drive slowly, but most likely they will not go anywhere and will order pizza. Pizza delivery drivers will be happier and somewhat safer. I think more pizza will be consumed. Story 36. I enjoy both. However, there will always be trade-offs. Personally, I think there should be a higher age limit on cannabis, as it makes people less sociable, while alcohol tends to make people more sociable. With everyone becoming increasingly isolated, I think encouraging physical contact and discussion is vital to being human. Just my take, though. Story 37. I smoke daily. It is far less damaging than if I drank alcohol daily, laughing out loud, mentally, socially, and physically. However, people who claim it is non-addictive are wrong. It is definitely addictive, and you can become dependent on it quickly. If I run out, I cannot sleep, I cannot eat, and my brain is filled with intrusive thoughts. People need to be more honest about its addictive qualities. Story 38. Good, but not good enough. Marijuana is much less directly dangerous, especially if you do not smoke it. It can harm the developing brain and slow cognitive function when used during adolescence, but at least it's not actively trying to kill you like alcohol is. Better to be impaired than dead. Story 39. The risk of mental health problems from cannabis is highest when use begins in adolescence, ages 12 to 17, and declines through the early 20s as the brain matures. By the mid-20s, most studies indicate that the increased risk of depression or anxiety is substantially reduced, although it is not entirely absent. Story 40. For your body, tetrahydrocannabinol is mostly beneficial if tobacco use is excluded. For your mind, it is not necessarily beneficial, as it increases the risk of psychosis and of developing or worsening schizophrenia. Story 41. My only concern is that studies indicate it has detrimental effects on developing brains. This is not to say alcohol does not have similar effects. I do not think anyone of any age should drive under the influence, yet I smell marijuana coming from other cars almost every day while I am driving. Story 42. I hate the smell of weed. I do not dislike people who smoke it, but all the problems I have with cigarettes I also have with smoking weed. The worst flatmate I ever had smoked indoors all the time, and our landlord warned us because smoking was not allowed inside. I asked them to at least smoke in the backyard. Every time I came home from work, I could smell weed as soon as I opened the front door. The smell lingered for weeks after they left, soaked into my couch, and I had to pay to get it removed. Story 43. When my condominium neighbors drink, I cannot smell the alcohol through the vents. Story 44. I do not know what it was like before, but many young people are now in recovery programs only for marijuana. Story 45. Fine. Researchers need more data points regarding the long-term effects of regular marijuana use. Story 46. I am in a recreational state, and almost every day I am behind drivers in traffic who are smoking marijuana while driving. Story 47. I hate that smell. It is everywhere these days, and it is out of control. Story 48. I've never seen someone pick a fight while being stoned, maybe with a piece of pizza. I have seen people pick fights when drunk many times. There is no hangover with pot. Story 49. I work at a liquor store, so it's a bit of a problem for us. Otherwise, I don't have much of an opinion on it. Alcohol is pretty bad for you. Story 50. I am 38 years old. I started using marijuana at 12 and continued for 20 years. After a 6-year break, I started using it again occasionally, which turned into a month of daily use. I believe people should be able to choose what goes into their bodies, but for me it triggers psychological problems. Your mileage may vary. Story 51. I know 2 people who were heavy cannabis smokers in adolescence. Both became psychotic by their late teens. One has been in and out of jail for years, and the other committed suicide. Cannabis can affect the developing brain. Story 52. As someone who is 22 years old and struggling with marijuana addiction, this is not a joke. I have smoked since I was 7 and have been a daily smoker since age 11. I suffer from cannabinoid hyperemesis. I smoke more than a gram of wax concentrate a day to manage my anxiety and post-traumatic stress disorder. And I always have to have money for cannabis cartridges because flour is no longer strong enough to prevent my symptoms. Sometimes I vomit so forcefully that I see blood. It is getting worse. I cannot physically continue at this level because of time and health constraints, so eventually I will have to quit or it could kill me. Please do not abuse cannabis. I thought it was harmless too, but now it is too late for me. Story 53. If there is one thing about marijuana that is worse than alcohol, it is the smell. Thank God none of my roommates smoke, because I would have gone insane. Story 54. I agree. It is hard to justify spending $30 or more on 3 beers at the brewery when you could buy a bag of gummies for the same amount, which will last for several buzzes. Also, you do not feel hungover the next day. Story 55. It may not create physical dependencies, but it is definitely creating mental ones for too many people. If you are debilitated without your recreational drugs, you have a serious problem. Story 56. You are starting to see the mental health effects of being less social. Story 57. Many people believe that cannabis is a safer alternative to alcohol, but recent studies show that regular use, especially by younger people, carries significant health risks. Alcohol is a carcinogen. No amount is safe. The more alcohol you consume, the greater your long-term risk of cancer. Story 58. I hate that we have normalized driving while high. It is dangerous and selfish. Story 59. I view weed as a twofold substance. It reduces demand for both alcohol and tobacco. I have made the switch, though I occasionally enjoy a beer or a glass of bourbon. It makes sense. Alcohol is very destructive to the body and, in excess, to social relationships. Story 60. To me, it's like asking about my opinion on switching from domestic violence to binge eating. But both are dangerous to a young person's growing body, even though alcohol is, in my opinion, worse. Story 61. Their health will be better for it. Not that marijuana does not cause problems. It is just far less destructive than alcohol. Story 62. Since the legalization of cannabis, I smell it everywhere, especially when driving. That concerns me. Story 63. The legal prohibition on cannabis has always been a racist policy, perpetuated because it fuels the prison industrial complex. People who banned it opposed it because it brought people together in ways that alcohol did not. Legalization is positive, but as long as cannabis remains federally banned, it will harm vulnerable and marginalized people. Story 64. People are not supposed to drink alcohol or inhale smoke. We live and we die. I would rather deal with a pot smoker than an alcoholic, though. Story 65. I think it is an improvement. However, I am skeptical of the growing corporate influence on the cannabis industry. Story 66. I get it, but it is decimating many industries and contributing to the isolation of people, which bums me out. Story 67. Do whatever you want, but acknowledge and understand that it is an addictive habit and can lead to lethargy, apathy, low motivation, paranoia, and to believing that every surface-level philosophical idea you have is somehow groundbreaking and profound. Do not tell me you are not addicted when you are having to smoke at 7:30 a.m. just to take the edge off, or when you would rather sit on the couch and get high instead of doing chores. It is your business. Do what you want, but do not lie to yourself or make excuses. Story 68. I wish I had stopped drinking and started smoking weed earlier. Alcohol is definitely much worse for you. Story 69. It is not just younger people. More seniors than ever are taking part. Story 70. 3 guys I knew in high school died doing really dumb things while drunk. No stoners died. Story 71. I don't mind people who smoke weed, but you stink. Go take a shower and don't come around me until you do. Story 72. It is probably a good thing. As someone who cannot stand the smell, it is somewhat annoying when it is constantly around. Story 73. Alcohol destroys lives. Marijuana makes you hungry and forgetful, and then you start laughing about it. Story 74. I prefer sharing the road with drivers who are high rather than with drivers who are drunk. Story 75. I hear this is true and I think it is great. In my past, I was both a heavy drinker and a regular cannabis user, and out of all those times, alcohol was the substance that came with trouble. Alcohol. I am a pretty nice and fun drunk, but I did some stupid and sometimes dangerous things. When you drink too much, you fall and break things. It is not a good substance. It is also far from healthy in the long run for organs and such. Fortunately, I was always the sober driver, so I did not drink and drive, which sadly is often culturally acceptable at bars. Cannabis. The worst thing I recall doing is accidentally forgetting to pick someone up. I said I would and lost track of time. That could happen sober, but since I was high, we can blame that. I also accidentally burned a hole in my rug. The main issue with cannabis now is that it is still not healthy, and we do not know enough about vaping products, but mostly it is much more potent. I see people dabbing constantly or taking 50 milligrams or more of edible tetrahydrocannabinol. When I was young, we had low-potency cannabis that got you high without blasting you through the roof. I enjoy some hash and similar products here and there, but for new users, it is not good how powerful some products are. Most importantly, I believe cannabis should be legal everywhere because the Farm Bill loophole is hurting people and the market. I am in some cannabis groups and see people buying tetrahydrocannabidiol thinking it is just cannabis, and then becoming intoxicated for days, freaking out, and going to the emergency room. Also, products containing Delta-8 tetrahydrocannabinol or Delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol are widely available. It is good that you can get vapes and other products in states where cannabis is illegal, but I fear the lack of regulation. I hope for a day when cannabis is fully legal, strictly regulated, and we stop trying to make products that are 99.9% tetrahydrocannabinol. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.